Well, there I was, surrounded by orphans on both sides, on low health, and due to the stressful situation, I did not realize that I had already used up all of my ammo in my shotgun and was about to be crushed by my enemies, making me go through all of that again. It's situations like these where Cronos The New Dawn truly excels. Hard-pounding last stands that put you on the back foot with seemingly no way out, where every single item you have, or don't have, can mean the difference between life and death. These are the kinds of moments that modern survival horror games often shy away from. Games like Resident Evil have become more action-y over time, always granting you a comfortable amount of ammo and medpacks so that even if you run out of ammo in one, you can rest assured you will have more than enough in another. Others, like Silent Hill, make sure you can swap to an alternative melee weapon to keep enemies at bay. And yet others, like Dead Space, are dead because EA, our massive fuck Kronos, does none of those things. Kronos is intentionally stingy with its items, making sure that there's never enough ammo to deal with enemies directly, never enough health packs to keep you topped up, and never enough items to upgrade your gear in what would feel like a parallel progression alongside the ever-increasing challenge, forcing you to use your environment or even non-combat items to come out on top. Which brings us back to that moment in the beginning of the video. I didn't actually die there. Not that time. I used a flame charge, usually used to burn corpses and remove biomass walls to stun the orphans and gain some breathing room to swap to another gun to take them out. This tight balancing of your ammo and item economy makes for a pretty brutal experience, and paired with its somewhat rarer art style, Kronos carves out something you won't easily forget. But it does raise the question: does this game really have a place when Dead Space already exists, or is it bold enough to spark a new dawn for survival horror? Cronos The New Dawn is a new, brutally punishing survival horror game by Bloober Team that seeks to re-emphasize the survival in survival horror. In this game, you step into the role of the Traveler, who has been tasked with gathering the souls of key individuals in the hopes of finding a way to prevent the Change, a world-ending viral infection that is turning humanity into bloodthirsty mutants. To do this, the Traveler must journey back in time, along the way learning what really happened and how she fits into the story. Before we continue, I want to thank Bloober Team for providing me with a key to make this video. I am truly humbled and want to assure you all of the opinions in this video are my own and have in no way, shape or form been influenced by Bloober Team themselves. The team has stated that ever since they finished their previous original IP, The Medium, they wanted to shift gears from psychological horror to something that had more appeal to a wider market, swapping out the more adventure-like game structure of their previous game to something more gameplay-oriented. This manifested itself into the game we see, or actually don't see, because the flashlight decides when we are allowed to see things, and everything is so goddamn dark. When the mighty flashlight bestows the gift of sight on us mere mortals, we see an alternative dystopian 1980s Poland with an anomaly-filled environment full of floating debris, destroyed homes, and fleshy, undulating walls made up of the Changed, infected who were quote-unquote lucky enough to not become orphans, which were unable to merge with the central mass, causing them to feel lonely and lost, which is why they seek to merge with other beings. Alongside this, I guess you could say, rather normal dystopian setting, with people that take the joke about being in your walls a bit too literally, you also have this future tech inspired by the movie Alien and the older Star Wars movies, which the developers specifically call cassette futuristic instead of retro futuristic. All of this comes together to form an already quite dark and hopeless setting, which is then enhanced by the claustrophobic areas you are forced to slow walk through and the thick fog that permeates any and all outdoor areas, hiding unseen monstrosities. But the game sections in the past must be much more welcoming. I hear you think. One would think so, but the time frame in which you go back to pick some brains is already post-outbreak, so the usually lively living quarters are now hauntingly empty, the hospitals are already overrun, and ground zero of the infection has turned into a full-blown war zone. The difference between the dystopian future and the soon-to-be dystopian past is palpable. You may still be in a dystopian past, but the still somewhat lived-in areas of the past carry a sense of familiarity that feels oddly comforting when compared to the oppressiveness of the future. It's in these jumps between present and past that the story finds its central theme, at least in my opinion, learning to accept what cannot be changed. And while that is a theme that can fit exceptionally well for stories that involve time travel and the apocalypse, this story is not utilizing that theme well. But let's first talk about the story so we can actually discuss its shortcomings. Spoilers, obviously. You wake up as the Traveler, one of the chosen few who follow the Calling, an enigmatic task that they treat with a pseudo-religious devotion, which I don't really need to tell you as they never shut up about it. The death of your predecessor triggers your awakening, and with it, the worst alarm imaginable, followed by some technical difficulties, before you finally break out of a capsule into a surreal area where the fog barely lets you see beyond your immediate surroundings. Your first job is to continue where your predecessor left off. Find a conspiracy theorist who might know about the origins of the change. After tracking him down in the past, you consensually rip out his essence and bring it to the terminal, the hub where travelers upload essences to the collective. Yet another proper noun group that will totally get explained. But the upload fails, leaving the essence stuck in your head, where it blames the outbreak on the travelers. Alongside the terminal, you meet the Warden, a caretaker who claims to have once been a traveler himself. Confused at there being another role aside from travelers, you move on, following a lead from the essence toward a worker who was at ground zero. Moving to ground zero, which is the steelworks, your chunky ass runs into a problem. You learn you'll need gravity boots to reach another essence and start searching for a new pair of shoes. With that sorted, you press deeper into the overrun facility and through a quarantine area. Reaching your target, you're given a choice. Take his essence and risk him killing himself, or go against the collective by taking the essence of his infected brother. I went with the brother because who doesn't like a little craziness? Heading back to the terminal, you find it offline. Looking for the Warden, you see him playing piano, musing about how humanity was an anomaly, doing things for joy and whimsy instead of constantly chasing an objective, like the constantly on the grind set Traveler. Naturally, he's pissed when she dismisses his self-expression as a waste of time, especially since he's hinted at to be old and running out of time. And that's just the Warden in a nutshell. He's not like the rest of the Travelers who talk like every task is a religious experience. He'll muse about cats, throw out a break a leg, and his whole look has this kind of flair to it that makes him feel more like a person who chose how to present himself in a very certain way, instead of just another drone in service of the Calling. Reflecting on this deep discussion about the point of it all for all about 10 seconds, the Traveler continues to the hospital, where you run into a woman whom we have met briefly at the steelworks, now trapped in an elevator. You free her with a toxin to decay away the biomatter, but the elevator falls into the basement. Following her, you find her again with a now changed doctor and learn about a third unit's existence, the Pathfinder. Taking the doctor's essence maxes out the Traveler's smooth brain, causing some severe side effects and forcing her back to the Warden. She pleads for help, tells him about the Pathfinder, and then passes out. When she wakes, her mind is cleared and her next target has been selected and is at an abbey in the city outskirts. But here, the Traveler faces her greatest challenge yet, a game-breaking bug that, as of writing, halts progression entirely. Moving through the catacombs, you reach what remains of your last target, who has now become a changed abomination, with the Pathfinder stuck, seemingly dead, underneath her. Defeating her allows you to carry the now confirmed corpse of the Pathfinder back to the terminal. It is also revealed that the Pathfinder is the Warden, and it is here where my understanding of what is happening entirely breaks down. So it seems as if the Warden, or Pathfinder, whatever you want to call him, has been taking bits and pieces from other travelers to create a traveler of his own, so he could implant the soul of Veronica, the woman from the past whom the Warden grew fond of, into that newly built traveler, in the hopes of essentially giving her a second chance after her death? This did not sit right with the traveler, who accidentally ripped what remained of the original woman's torso off a pillar. This, in turn, pissed off the Warden, who then somehow took control of his younger body, so he could try to return to the past to fix everything again. Trying to stop him for some reason, we follow him to a tower where we meet the woman, or rather yet another version of her that is not dead or a traveler. We explain to her that the Pathfinder is dangerous for some reason, and that he only wants to save her. The Pathfinder takes offense to that, and we begin our final battle against him. After being defeated, he pleads with us to allow him to try again, to fix all this by traveling back in time when all the defunct tech around them still worked, so they could use it to find a cure for the change. For some reason, this is bad, and we are given a choice to spare him or to kill him. I genuinely do not understand why we would shoot him. He and the game itself make it abundantly clear that the woman would keep looking for a cure no matter what, so why would stopping that in its tracks be a good choice? By my confusion, you can probably tell that at this point I had no goddamn clue why anything was happening. Lucky for you, I now know why. Because no matter what the traveler does, she knows that both choices lead to the doom of humanity. Sparing him essentially restarts the loop, as the woman is infected already, and he would rip her essence out, with which he would eventually create the traveler. Shooting him ends the timeline with the doom of humanity, as the traveler accepts that the outbreak is not their fault and sends the infected woman back in time. And if you have the patience to play through NG+, you unlock yet another ending. This ending has the Pathfinder realize the error in his ways, and the traveler and the woman travel to the past and try to save humanity without someone having a predetermined path laid out for them. In general, this game has a massive issue with overly convoluted exposition. Sure, it can be done that way, and I won't tell the devs to change it if they don't want to, but man, I would have loved to get at least some clear explanation about the collective, the essences, the change, and how some changed seemingly keep their minds, like the changed mother from the Abbey, in ways that aren't just tied to scattered logs. Don't get me wrong. From what little I understood about the story, there are some really cool ideas. For example, the notion that humanity was doomed no matter what, since they would have eventually awakened the infection, whether now or later, is genuinely compelling. The plot thread about these pseudo-automata with their almost religious zeal for the collective, despite not even knowing what the collective intends to do or what the vocation fully is also very interesting. But none of that was ever presented in a way that made any discussion about it feel worthwhile or rewarding. A bit of an odd comparison to make here, but if you compare the religion that came to be from the marker's influence in Dead Space, or the religion that was formed around Las Plagas in Resident Evil 4, you don't get the full picture immediately, or never in the case of Dead Space, but you are given just enough to speculate and build theories on. In Kronos, you are never given satisfying developments to any of the big question marks in the story. Hell, some are even outright explained to you, but it doesn't feel satisfying. Where do the time portals even come from? The Pathfinder makes them. Why is the Pathfinder the only one to do that? It is not like he holds an inner power that none of the other travelers have. He just has an extra tool. So much for that mystery. And as a whole, the time travel kinda just never really goes anywhere in a satisfying way either. The essences never really mattered, as it is hinted at that the Warden just needed them to make the traveler's artificial personality more stable. And the past sections are also not that interesting, as they are just brighter versions of the future areas. travels. Sure, it makes sense, but it would have been more interesting if the time travel involved going far back in time and getting closer and closer to the apocalypse with each time jump, maybe allowing these almost robotic travelers to experience the way humans lived, like how the Warden, back when he was still the Pathfinder, came to do. It was such a profound thing to him that he stopped caring about the vocation and just wanted to do his own thing. I would have loved to see that development. Like, what happened to the scenes in the trailer of the traveler sitting down with people in the past? Those felt so compelling. It genuinely is so obtuse, it is oppressive. And while that is a negative here, it, in my opinion, is a massive positive in the gameplay. Hey there everyone, this is Hawks from the future, and I'm just butting in here real quick to make a small announcement. We have channel memberships now. There's only one tier for 2 whole schmeckles. I know, quite a lot, but it gets you some neat bird themed badges and emotes. And aside from that, if you do decide to grant upon me your hard-earned doubloons, you will also get my videos early, and you will also be shouted out at the end of each and every video. However, if you don't want to get a membership, that is all good too. Your viewership is quite enough for me, and always appreciated more than you could possibly think. Alright, I'll leave you to the video again now. Everything from the ever-present orphans to the very apparent lack of ammunition is oppressive. Unlike other horror games, Kronos isn't really scary. It doesn't put its money on eerie scenarios, though those are still present. It instead puts all of its effort into making you feel as uncomfortable as possible for as long as possible. There was a section in the Steelworks area where you go through a quarantine zone. Not only do you immediately know what this means, but the dread increases as you enter due to the entrance being a winding route with dormant corpses in your way. And when you then get into the proper quarantine area, you see row upon row of not just regular enemies, but some big guys as well, just sitting there. Menacingly! Not moving a centimeter, ready to spring into action with every step you take. But the kicker is, they don't. The game keeps you tense, but never releases that tension. It allows it to build and build, and once you think you are maybe able to let your guard down, Kronos will snap the trap shut, forcing you to rapidly evaluate the situation, count how many enemies you are facing, gauge whether you have the gear to take them on, and look for an unobstructed escape route, which most likely doesn't exist, and then figure out how to deal with that fact. The gameplay at first may seem like your box standard survival horror, and let's not kid ourselves, it is your box standard survival horror. You've got marked containers to smash, an inventory so small it makes those pants you swear you can still fit into look like a roomy apartment, and you've got a compass you can trigger that tells you where to go, which of course means you absolutely do not go in that direction until you've scoured every corner for whatever goodies might be left. However, where Kronos sets itself apart is in never letting you overpower the orphans. In other games, you might have ample space and speed to get away, or maybe even a dodge button. Kronos does not give you those comforts. The Traveler is slow and heavy, so dodges are not possible. This forces her to either run away from the orphans, which usually ends up with you getting hit since they're faster, or facing them with your ever-dwindling supplies. Taking out every enemy, however, isn't an option either, because the further you get into the game, the more of them there will be. Here, the charged shot mechanic becomes the make or break of combat. Shooting your guns normally will only ever amount to wasting ammo, since the real stopping power is hidden behind charged attacks. These range from simply stronger shots that pierce enemies to changing the functionality of your weapon, like tracking rounds that make sure not a single bullet goes to waste. But charging is risky, it takes time, and in these tight spaces, time is life. Charging slows you down, and moving while firing throws off your aim. So, do you hold your ground and risk a hit, or do you disengage, run away, and try to get a charged shot off from further away? Sad orphans that just want to belong aren't the only thing that determines how you play. Kronos also messes with how you build yourself up. The totally consensual essence collecting doesn't just give you soul STDs, it also augments your playstyle in ways that can make life a lot easier. One essence might let your burst rifle deal more damage if you stand still, while another boosts your shotgun damage if you burn your enemies alive. Combine that with the fact that every bullet and every currency pickup matters, and suddenly your inventory becomes its own survival puzzle, as space is painfully limited, and expanding it takes forever. It took me 3/4 of the game to max mine out, and I only managed that by putting aside other upgrades like health for a while. And if all that wasn't enough, the corpses that you just created during combat are still a problem. The latter option of disengaging that I mentioned earlier might sound like the way to go, but while you did that, a body you left behind got absorbed, powering up an orphan with more damage or invincibility in certain spots, and, of course, a full heal. This mechanic keeps up the pressure in a brilliant way, forcing you to deal not just with the enemies that are still standing, but also the ones you already killed. Burning corpses or interrupting an orphan mid-merge costs precious time and opens you up to attacks, but if you don't step in, you're basically letting the orphans play together. And we can't have them happy now, can we? It is so discouraged to let that happen that the game even rewards you for burning your first 25 orphans. Yup. And speaking of orphan playtime, the game makes damn sure you know when that's happening. Whenever an orphan starts trying to merge with a corpse, there's this distinct sound cue that immediately tells you, shoot that orphan right now. Who's gonna care? Their parents? It's one of the many ways Kronos uses audio very effectively. Every sound is there to set the mood and give you information about your surroundings, and doing it in a way that does not feel out of place. Everything sounds satisfying, from the crunchiness of the snow you tread on, to the moist gloopiness of the change in the walls, to the haunting ambient noises, and most of all, the booming shots of your guns. Hell, this game has a section where the ambient sounds are a massive reference to John Carpenter's The Thing. I'm not the only one who thinks this is a reference, right? I swear, that is what is happening here. And speaking of the ambient sounds, the BGM in Kronos is a dark synth soundtrack that reinforces the game's futuristic dystopian setting, and at the same time it manages to inspire curiosity in your surroundings while never pulling you out of the crushing atmosphere. Instead, it leans on constant droning tones that blend into the background and only truly register in moments of absolute silence. Cronos The New Dawn is a very tightly made game. One clearly designed for a specific subset of survival horror fans, which ends up being both its greatest strength and its biggest weakness. It cranks the difficulty up to an absurd degree and never lets up in its mission to make your experience absolute hell. It doesn't quite reach the magnum opus of survival horror that is Dead Space in terms of story, and it doesn't climb to the thrilling action highs of Resident Evil 4. But what it does do is present a game that forces you to play on its terms, even laughing in your face when, after finally beating it, you unlock a difficulty selection, only to discover it exclusively lets you make things harder. So, does Kronos really have a place when Dead Space already exists? I'd say yes, because it isn't trying to replace Dead Space at all. Instead, it fills a smaller, more brutal niche, a survival horror experience that thrives on scarcity, pressure, and failure. That kind of uncompromising vision tells me that Bloober Team might not have every aspect of game development nailed down just yet, but they're making huge strides toward becoming a studio that can carry on the torch of Dead Space, or maybe even create the spark of a new one.